We've got a very intriguing question for this episode of why does it do that? What happens when you cover every single port on a MacBook? So that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to take this USB-C port, it's the headphone jack, the HDMI port, the MagSafe port, and the SD card slot and cover all of them. But why? Well, let's find out. Okay, so before we begin, I think it's important to note that I covered every port here with something solid. So these are not just open holes where maybe water could get in or dust could get in. These are actually fully covered by rubber and plastic. The only thing that isn't covered is the power button. And this is because I read online that if you cover that, then your Mac will never start up. So we have left that one open. But everything else is covered. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted to see what would happen when I tried to charge the computer with MagSafe while having every other port covered. Because there's actually two ways that you can charge a MacBook. You can either plug in the MagSafe cable into the MagSafe port, or you can plug in a USB-C cable into either one of these ports. And usually when you do that, the MagSafe port will deactivate and you'll see a little line through the MagSafe icon in the menu bar up here, indicating that it's not being used because there's another way of charging the device. But what happens when you cover that port, which is also the port that the MagSafe cable plugs into? What happens when you cover that port and try to charge it with MagSafe? That's what we're going to find out right now. So let's go ahead and plug it in. Nothing happened. Let's try again. Still nothing. So it seems like covering the MagSafe port won't cause any issues. In fact, you can see in the menu bar there's no MagSafe icon at all. It's just not even showing up. I thought this was really weird, so I decided to use an adapter so that I could plug in my MagSafe cable into a USB-C port instead. Because when you do this, you would expect the MagSafe port to activate, but it's not. So let's go ahead and plug that in. There we go. Charging. So you can see here in the menu bar, the little lightning bolt icon has appeared, indicating that we are charging via the USB-C port rather than the MagSafe port. Now keep in mind, if you were to do this with a different cable, so if we were to remove this one and plug in a regular USB-C cable, the MagSafe port would still work, right? If I were to plug this in, we would see the line appear through the MagSafe icon, and it would charge via the USB-C port instead. But because I'm using this special cable that only works with MagSafe, it's basically forcing it to charge via this port right here. Now, since we're already plugged into power, I want to see how much power this computer is drawing from the wall. Because theoretically, if you cover the ports and plug it into power, then it should be drawing more power from the wall, because both the MagSafe port and the USB-C port are being used simultaneously. So let's check this out. So right now we're at 43 watts. Let's go ahead and plug in the MagSafe cable. You can see 46 watts. So it's drawing about 3 more watts from the wall when both of these are being used at the same time. Now we know that covering the ports doesn't cause any issues when it comes to charging. But what happens if we cover the ports and then restart the computer? Let's find out. So I've got Alfred open here. I've put in the command to shut down the computer. Let's go ahead and hit enter and just wait for it to shut down. Alright, it's completely shut down. Let's go ahead and hold the power button. Nothing happened. Let's try again. Nothing happened. Let's try again. Finally, it did something. It finally turned on, but it went straight into recovery mode. Now, I don't entirely understand what just happened there, but what I do know is that you can't really do anything from here. So let's go ahead and hold the power button again and see if we can make it turn back on normally. Okay, so we are back in macOS. So it did seem to be working okay. We didn't have any issues turning it on, but it did boot into recovery mode when we first tried to turn it on after covering all of the ports. Let's try this one more time just to confirm that this wasn't just a fluke. Let's shut it down one more time and see if we have the same result. Alright, it's completely shut down. Let's go ahead and hold the power button. Nothing happened. Let's try again. Nothing happened. Let's try yet again. Here we go. Recovery mode. Yep, every single time we cover all the ports and shut the computer down, it boots into recovery mode. This is really strange, and I couldn't find anyone online who had experienced this or had even tested this out. This is the first time that I've seen this behavior. And it's interesting because I don't know if this is something that Apple actually did on purpose, or if this is just a coincidence. I mean, if you think about it, when you cover all of the ports, it does make sense that it would go into some sort of a diagnostic mode. Because when you plug in a Mac and it sees no ports that it can use to charge the device, it's going to assume that there might be something wrong with the device itself, and it's going to put itself into a diagnostic mode where it basically tries to figure out what's going on. I mean, if we take a look at what happens when you pull out the battery and shut the computer down, it basically does the same thing. It puts the computer into a state of limbo where it basically is trying to figure out what's going on. Is there a battery in the computer? Is it plugged in? What's the status of all the ports? It's basically trying to collect data about the environment that it's in to make sure that it can operate safely. If you think about it, when you cover all the ports, you're basically doing the same thing. You're telling the computer that none of its ports are available, so it should basically put itself into a state of limbo and just kind of figure things out. This is purely speculation on my part, but I do think that this is probably what's happening. What's really interesting, though, is that I haven't seen anyone else talk about this online. I've searched high and low, and I just can't find anyone else who has ever experienced this or even tested this out. Yeah, maybe. I am the first person to do this, but I doubt that. I feel like someone has probably done this before. But the fact that I can't find anyone who has done this makes me think that this is probably a very rare occurrence. The good news is that it's not really a problem, because you can simply unplug the MagSafe cable, and then it will boot up normally. So it's not like you're going to be stuck in recovery mode forever. Just unplug the MagSafe cable, and then it should boot up just fine. But yeah, I thought this was pretty interesting. I thought it was worth sharing, because I just haven't seen anyone else talk about this online. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.